Good morning. Good morning, everyone. My name is Nancy Aborto, and I think I actually know everyone in the audience this morning, but just for those online who may not know me, I'm the Deputy Director of the Food and Nutrition Division at FAO, and I'm pleased to be your moderator this morning for our session on nutrition-sensitive, climate-smart agri-food systems. Moving from our commitments to our action, this week, we have had a launch by the COP27 presidency of the Initiative on Climate Action and Nutrition. And today we're going to talk about actions that are already happening on the ground for climate and nutrition and how we can scale those up. Now that we see nutrition high on the COP agenda, we want to take advantage of this momentum to move forward for impact. So to get us started today, I'm going to turn over to Zeitouni, my dear colleague, who is the Deputy Director of the Office of Climate, Biodiversity, and Environment at FAO's headquarters in Rome, Italy. Zeitouni, over to you.
Great. Thank you very much, Nancy, and good morning, everyone. I don't know if I could just stand up here, I guess. So welcome to this event. We've been really very excited on where we are now. It's been a while actually waiting for this moment. Finally, we have a good recognition of food and agriculture as an important part of addressing the climate crisis and other crises as well. But along with that also, it's very good to also recognize the other component that are linked to food and agriculture, and nutrition is one of the critical ones, obviously. I'm sure you all know the statistics about, hungry people around the world, almost 830 million people, and about 3 billion people who can't afford just the basic, the cheapest, nutritious, healthy diet. And when we think about the growing population, obviously, this is the biggest challenge, is how do we continue feeding and nourishing a growing population while at the same time addressing these crises that we live in now and the remaining climate crisis, because it is going to stay with us, unfortunately. So nutrition, it's good now we're shedding a lot of light on that. Particularly, we heard a lot of talk about it, during this COP, and that's really encouraging. When we had the launch of the FAST initiative, there were so many ministers there, and many of them actually spoke about food and nutrition. So it's really great achievement, and we all working in this sphere, I think, should be really very pleased that there is this formal recognition now, and it can only get better going forward. Now, with regard to climate change and other crises, as Nancy said, this is really time for implementation. We've been talking about these challenges and problems for so long. We know what they are. We know what we need to do. And by bringing this key element that unless we include them, we are not going to be addressing, the climate goal properly, then it's really good to give them that visibility with the evidence and with this kind of events where you go deeper into the role of nutrition for climate action. And just to say also that for us, this is timely. As FAO, we've been working on this area in terms of addressing the climate crisis for a while, with all the elements that link to that. And we've got a new strategy now on climate change, and also a strategy on science and innovation. And all these really are focused on a package of solutions that we want to see being implemented with partners and others in order to address this crisis. And nutrition is one of the key points that we recognize in the strategy, healthy diets in particular. I mean, this is really critical because it's not climate change is not only, particularly in relation to global food security, it's not only about reducing emissions. We've been talking about reducing emissions for so long. I think the most challenging thing is to get people to change their behavior, their attitude towards food, and realize that actually, on one hand, food is nourishing people. On the other hand, is causing disease for people when you're obese and overweight. So that's why the nutrition aspect has to be addressed as one of the measures, one of the solutions in addressing climate change. So thank you again. I hope this sets the scene briefly for the discussion, and I look forward to joining in. Thank you.
Thank you, Zitouni. One thing that Zitouni said that I just want to underline is that we have moved away from talking about just feeding the planet. And I think you may all know that the announcement that this week we actually passed the 8 billion mark in number of people living on our planet. And we need to be sure we are nourishing those 8 billion people. And so as we talk about climate action, we need to be talking about climate action in nutrition, not just climate action in food. So thank you, Zitouni, for highlighting that for us. And how do we do that? How do we link these things? Well, we have with us Carlo Fada, Dr. Carlo Fada, who is the Director of Biodiversity for Food and Agriculture at the Alliance of Biodiversity International in CGIAR. And he's going to take a few minutes to talk to us about the science behind connecting our food, nutrition, and climate.
Thank you, Nancy, and thank you for inviting me to this very important event. I think when we think about agriculture and the global crisis, Tony has alluded, I would say we have four. One is the nutrition crisis. According to the latest report on food and nutrition security, there are 800 million people that are hungry when they go to sleep. And this is an increase of 150 million from the data pre-pandemic, so it's growing again. And as you mentioned, there are many more, probably more than half of the global population have some nutrition crisis, one of the three burdens of malnutrition, macronutrient deficiencies, or obesity. So it's a very serious challenge. We have a climate change. Agriculture is a victim and also responsible for it. Agriculture emits about 30% of the greenhouse gases, so it's significantly contributing to climate change. We have a land degradation crisis. 40% of arable land is degraded in a way or another. And we have a biodiversity crisis. People talk about the sixth mass extinction, which is driven by us, by humanity, and agriculture is responsible for 80% of the species loss, being it through deforestation or being it through pollution, etc. So the crises are enormous, and the good news is that agriculture can actually address some of those crises if it wants to change its practices, if it wants to move towards a more sustainable world. And it can do so by having, a lot of intervention that we are aware of. FAO has been working a lot of it, the CGIAR has been working on those, and so, as you said, we know what to do. If you ask me what is the one element which is really kind of forgotten, which is not taken enough into consideration that can help resolve simultaneously those crises, is agrobiodiversity. Agrobiodiversity defined as not only the food that we eat. We have 6,000 species that are known to be edible, and we use only 5 or more than 70% of the calories intake from vegetables. But also the supporting agrobiodiversity, the pollinators, the loss of which can be accounted on the biodiversity loss, but it has tremendous economic impact on production and quality of crops that depend on such pollinators, like, for example, fruit trees that are also so important for nutrition, or the soil biodiversity, which is so important to sustain production and productivity, but also help control pests and diseases, and so it can prevent excessive use of pesticides and damaging chemicals. So that agrobiodiversity, I think, is not part enough of that debate, and we need to bring it back because it really has the potential to address simultaneously all those crises. Imagine a world in which you have agrobiodiverse system. I think it's not so difficult to do so because a lot of indigenous people, a lot of indigenous communities still rely on this world. You have the trees, you have the wild species, which are also important source of certain nutrients. You have crop rotation, a series of crops that work together in synergies to improve the soil fertility. And when you harvest from this biodiverse world that the indigenous people are so good at, you have all the micronutrients you need. Because the soil is always covered, you have much more carbon sequestration in the soil. you have more trees in production system that also contributes to absorb those crops. And so if you think of this kind of settings, permacultural settings, agroecological setting, in which agrobiodiversity can play an important role, then you are already moving a very big step forward. We have obstacles for that, and we allude to them later. In the CGIAR, we had a number of experience in the Alliance of Biodiversity and CIAT in using and trying to nailing down the science behind why agrobiodiversity is so important. In one of our projects in Kenya, Turkey, Brazil, and Sri Lanka, so very diverse countries, very different political context, social context, called the Biodiversity for Food and Nutrition, we've been looking at the diversity of food. Some of these 6,000 species that are in our potential portfolio of things that we can eat. And we've been looking at, for example, nutrient composition. It's very important to know about that. In Europe, as a child, your mothers, grandmothers always give you a glass of orange juice because it has vitamin C, and vitamin C is so important. We found for the first time that there is a fruit in the tropical forests of Latin America that you have matu-matu, which has 35 times more vitamin C than oranges. So that's one important way to promote agrobiodiversity, is to really understand how it contributes to nutrition and really promote for its nutritional value, because it affects our diets. But that is not enough. That will never be enough. We also need to promote the economy around these products. We need the incentives. Incentives is really a thorny issue because there are 700 billion global incentives for agriculture, the vast majority of which goes in supporting exactly the same destructive practices that characterize a modern production system. We need to shift and divert some of those incentives into the transition towards a more sustainable agriculture. And we can do this in three ways. One is, for example, recognizing the role of this indigenous community, the custodian farmers, in their role of conserving not only the seeds and the material and the biodiversity that is so important to them and should also be so important to us, but also the knowledge around it. And so you can have direct payment schemes. We have 200,000 families in Latin America that benefits from such direct payment schemes through programs about payment for agricultural conservation, agrobiodiversity conservation services, and other cases. You can do it through, for example, public procurement. Have schools, hospitals, prisons fed by acquiring food from this portfolio of agrobiodiversity. And then through market, value chains, developing more sustainable value chains options so that the farmers can sell, can have access to markets. And that, as you all know, requires kind of deep transformation in how markets work, in how trade agreements work. So it's a big challenge around us. And last, I would like also to emphasize the fact that this the diversity that we talk about is not only the diversity of crops, it's also the genetic diversity. We found that there is a lot of variability in performance, adaptation, resilience to climate change when you look at what is inside diversity. Wheat, we have thousands of varieties of wheat, and we only rely on a bunch of few elite lines to develop our new wheat, but there is a lot more nutrient-dense varieties of wheat that we can use for our nutrition and that are much better adapted to the challenges posed by climate change. So we need to take this holistic approach to agrobiodiversity. The last point is that I'm not advocating for returning to a great past that never existed. The drudgery of managing this complex system is huge. It is on the shoulders mainly of women. And I think the advances in agriculture has been tremendous in terms of digital technology, digital agriculture, communication, information technology, drones, ways to monitor those much more complex production systems because now they are much more diverse. And I think we can use these advances to actually support the implementation and the development of production systems that are much more nature positive. Thank you.
Thank you, Carlo. I really appreciated that last comment as well, is that as we move forward to transform our food systems, we need to think about improving those. It's not transforming to go back to the past, but to a better future. Thank you for that. And I just wanted to highlight that everyone in your seat, you've got a card that's a publication that dives deep into this issue of climate change, biodiversity, and nutrition nexus. So I invite you to look at that publication for more information, and appreciate very much the comments from Carlo here linking that. And so that biodiversity is a real driver of both healthy diets and sustainable food systems. But we can't just assume that we're going to have healthy diets and sustainable food systems by increasing biodiversity. It's really the actors across the entire food system, agri-food system, that are necessary. So now we're going to have a panel of experts who come from across that whole range of actors of the agri-food system to reflect on this topic of the climate nutrition nexus. So let me invite, please, the panel up. First, Brent Loken. He is the Global Food Lead Scientist at the World Wildlife Fund. Brent, thank you. We've got Tom Grasso. Tom, welcome. He's the Vice President of Climate Resilient Food Systems, People and Nature Program at the Environmental Defense Fund. We have Erlene Cruz. Erlene, thank you for joining us today. She is the founder and director of Kitchen Connection. Kitchen Connection has been described as a revolutionary education hub for the next generation of food systems transformers, but she'll tell us more about that. And finally, we've got Miss Elizabeth Akaba. Elizabeth is a farmer from Ghana and the chairperson of the Tuba Women Farmers Association. So thank you all for joining us today. Let me take this microphone and hand it over to Brent, because he's going to go first as I ask you a few questions. So Brent, we know that to transform food systems, we've got to have commitment, we've got to have the tools, we've got to have action, we've got to have investment. So let's start off with commitments. They say where there's a will, there's a way. And I know that you've been working on integrating concepts around healthy diet and nutrition into nationally determined contributions. Can you tell us what that looks like?
Well, first of all, Nancy, I'd just like to thank you for having this conversation. And thank you to those of you that are out here on 8:30 on one of the last days of COP. I know we're all tired after being here for so long, but we're intrepid. And this is such a fantastically important conversation. So what does it look like? I mean, one of the things that we have to, that I think we're starting to realize, is that we need a food systems approach. That we will not be able to achieve the Paris Agreement without a food systems approach. You know, so what does that mean? It means that we have to look at food production, we have to look at food loss and waste, and we have to look at diets and what that looks like. And we have to integrate all of that into how we're addressing climate change. Now, up until this point, we've been lacking on the last one. We've talked a lot about food production, less about food loss and waste, and we've hardly mentioned the diet concept. And even at COP this year, diets has not been talked about to the extent that it should. Now, I think there's been some progress made. It looks like the Cornivia, I'm not sure what the latest is, but it sounds like, I think as of yesterday possibly, that food systems might be in the final text, potentially mentioned. It's not agreed upon. It might be punted until next year, but at least there might be some specific mention of food systems, so that might be progress. The G20 in their communique actually talked about food systems, and they specifically mentioned nutrition. So I think there is some progress on this, right? So within the chatter, there's some positive work that's being done. But then how do we move from that to actually work on the ground? And one of the main vehicles that we can use is actually NDCs. And we did an analysis on this that we just published before COP, and I apologize for bringing this up, but I just want to make sure that I have the numbers correct. We looked at 147 NDCs, 134 NDCs, and we analyzed them to look at, did they use a holistic approach when assessing their NDCs with their updated ones? What we found is that a holistic approach is still absent in most of them. Only 19 updated NDCs included measures for both sustainable food production and for reducing food loss and waste. Only 5 updated NDCs include measures for both sustainable food production and consumption. And only 2 NDCs have measures for sustainable food production, food loss and waste, and shifting to healthy and sustainable diets. Only 2 of all the NDCs. So you can see that we're still lacking. A lot of focus on food production, a little bit on food loss and waste, but much less on sustainable diets. And that's something that we're going to have to address.
Thank you, Brent. So if we do achieve increasing those numbers of that commitment that includes diets, how do you see that affecting national development?
I think it's absolutely central to national development because, you know, as countries are looking towards integrating and putting policies in place, the NDCs is one of the main tools to make this happen, right? But without the commitment in place in the NDCs to formally make consumption an important part of the NDCs, I worry that many countries are not going to be able to put the focus on it like we should. A lot of organizations come in it through other avenues, and then countries get nervous. Well, do I have to integrate, or do I have to start a new policy, a new program? What is it? I've already got the NDCs, I've got the NAPs, I've got all these other things, and that's why integrating them into a pre-existing pathway and policy mechanism is so important. And if we can do that, and when we can do that, and when we can achieve that, I think we're going to see an upscaling of commitment on this.
Thank you, Brent. And it's when we can do that, not if. Thanks for your adjustment in your language there. So we've got work to be done to get those commitments. But once we have commitments, that's not the full story, of course. We also need the tools for action. And so I'm going to ask Tom if you could talk a little bit about data and evidence. You and I have discussed this a lot, how better data can inform better solutions. So for you, what does better data mean in the context of climate action and nutrition?
Great. Thank you, Nancy, and it's great to be here this morning. Like Brent said, it's the last couple of days, but I've really been looking forward to this discussion. So I'm going to focus my remarks, I think, on a specific part of the agrobiodiversity food system that really has been largely ignored until very recently, and that's aquatic foods. And as Dr. Fudd, I think, was pointing out, the opportunity to really broaden our view of what agrobiodiversity can do should include aquatic foods. And in addition to all the other species that you mentioned, there's also thousands of species of aquatic foods and fishes that we have largely untapped the micronutrient value of. And so I think from a data perspective, understanding and an evidence perspective, having facts that actually help us make better decisions as governments and as policymakers is incredibly important. It's only been very recently that aquatic foods have been considered as part of food systems discussion. So last year, the UN Food Systems Summit was the first time that we really had a conversation about aquatic foods. And just in the last couple of years, for those of you who remember the Eat Lancet report that came out in 2017, virtually absent discussion about aquatic foods. And so the Blue Food Assessment was established in order to make up that deficit. And now we have a series of very important Journal of Nature papers that have been published, in addition to many others, that provide that the facts, the evidence that aquatic foods needs to be incorporated into any strategy that is going to address climate change and nutrition around the world. So we're very excited about that. My organization, our science team, has been a big part of that process. And going forward, we need to understand how to do climate smart and nutrient efficient decision making that currently is impeded by the way that current governments make decisions around the way that they subsidize agriculture and fisheries and the decisions that they make in terms of the way that they're managed. So without that kind of information, you can't make good decisions. And so it really depends on the information that's being provided. And part of what we're trying to do is make that information accessible, to have people understand that fish and aquatic foods, like many other food groups, aren't just a commodity. It's not just pounds of protein or calories. It's really about what's in them. And if we can get people to understand that, we'll be able to make better decisions.
Thank you. I could not agree with you more that when we're talking about the food that we're eating, it's not just a commodity, it's the quality that brings to people. So we at FAO, and you and I have discussed this, we're working on looking at the data, individual data of what people are eating, and looking at the nutritional value of actual data, individual quantitative data. But we are also working on linking that with that environmental impact, and we will have statistics and indicators around that available soon. It's not an easy task, but we think it's an important task. So what do you think that data could be used for? How would you advise governments, for example, for using that type of data that's linking the nutritional value and the environmental value impact?
Yeah, great question. And I think I'll answer it with aquatic foods in mind, because I think that's probably an area that, again, maybe just to sort of emphasize aquatic foods, although it applies more broadly as well. But if you think about, for example, looking at small pelagic fisheries off the coast of West Africa, they are generally seen as a commodity that gets ground up into fish powder or fish meal or fish oil and then shipped somewhere else to feed other types of food products. And we're missing the micronutrient value of those small pelagic fisheries in a place where both climate change and food insecurity is preeminent issue. And so if we were able to provide the type of data that Nancy is talking about to governments around what they actually have in their seas, what the real micronutrient value of those fisheries are, and how they can apply that to both the nutritional challenges as well as the climate change challenges that are being faced there would be a remarkably different way of making decisions by finance ministers, agricultural ministers, and for that matter, environment ministers, because they would look at the seas as a place of rich biodiversity, rich food biodiversity, and an opportunity to feed their people in a climate-smart way.
Thank you, Tom. And there's also more information about the financial impact of undernutrition and hunger and some of these micronutrient deficiencies and how that's impacting not only individuals but economies. And so exactly, if we can garner more information about what those diets look like, we can translate that into terms that can also be understood by those ministers of finance, which is very important. Super. So Tom, if you could pass the microphone, but you'll get it back before the end. I've got another question for both of you, so don't relax just yet. Our next speaker is Arlene Cruz. I'm so very pleased that you could join us today. You're an entrepreneur, an influencer, a chef, an activist, a mover and shaker, and you have founded this Kitchen Connection, which is, you're going to tell us about it, but it is facing the public. It's about what we're eating. So we're talking about the entire agri-food system, and Arlene's going to talk to us about what that means in terms of individuals and their diets. So if you could just start us off, though, by explaining what Kitchen Connection is and how it relates to this climate nutrition nexus, please.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for the honor of being here in your presence and in the presence of Dr. Zituni Utada, whose research and expertise we've used to fuel a lot of our work. So thank you so much. It's an honor to be here. We've collaborated since the COP in 2019, and it's really an honor. Thank you so much. At Kitchen Connection, we have a very simple mission and goal, and it's to educate the average person like myself, like my family, like my friends. I always have them in mind, especially those who don't care about food, to actually eat better for human and planetary health. And that is the goal. It's very simple. The medium that we educate through is really important. And so given our goal, we've changed those mediums and adapted them to the local context, to our evolving environment on and offline. We started with interactive cooking classes in 2012 before Zoom, but when Skype was already in existence. And the goal was not to teach people how to cook, because honestly there were more efficient ways even in 2012 to learn a recipe. Using YouTube or a blog or calling your mom is often more efficient. But the goal was to use food as a vehicle to understanding, to having people on the other side of that screen connecting and advancing what we like to call gastrodiplomacy. So food brings us together. Once we're together, what do? We talk about how to make the food system better. And that's one of our main goals. Over the years, we've developed many products like You know, we are currently in the midst of launching a cookbook, which we had our first event for yesterday, which I'll talk a little bit more about. And based on that, we're working on a TV series with Chef Jose Andres, which we had a little release during yesterday's cookbook launch, and another product, which is a children's book based on the cookbook. And you might be wondering, why are they doing so many projects at once? It wasn't our goal. They just kind of came to us, and it's hard to say no when they're just really good ideas. So apologies for my voice. I think we're all on the same boat here towards the end of COP. I hope you can hear me. How we relate to the topic, I think, is self-explanatory in a way, but I think that ultimately we know that, as was mentioned before, behavior needs to change, and that's one of the hardest things, right? We're working closely with Dr. Robin Dando at Cornell University, and what he does is fascinating research. He attaches nodes to people's brains, and he sees how taste perception actually changes in the brain in different environments. For example, you know, people have been known to crave tomato-based drinks. Oh, thank you so much. Thank you. Tomato-based drinks when they're on planes. So altitude has an impact on what we crave. It's absolutely fascinating. The point is that the data cannot only be quantitative. I think there's no disagreement there among all of us. It needs to be focused on qualitative data as well, and complementary. I recognize CGIAR's research on biodiversity, and I am appreciative of the fact that it's recognizing indigenous peoples and their cultural context, because culture is key. So that is really our goal, to look at cultural shifts. We might advocate for the reduction of firewood for planetary health reasons, but if people like the taste of charred food, you know, like they do in many parts of the world, I'm thinking India, for example, parts of India, parts of Southern Europe, then it's really hard to change that. So it needs to happen in complement to the qualitative and quantitative data. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So at FAO, we're working on food-based dietary guidelines for populations. And we are updating our guidance around food-based dietary guidelines that have really focused on nutritional value for the guidelines to incorporate an environmental value as well in diets. So this is guidance for food that we eat in terms of both the nutritional impact and the environmental impact. So Arlene, you're working on reaching consumers and in speaking to them. How could guidance like that be used for you? How could you use guidance like that?
Absolutely. Well, first of all, Nancy, I thank you for introducing me as a chef and influencer. I'm going to remove those hats because, to be honest, I have a lot to learn in the kitchen still. It's like this food world is so vast, and I consider myself to be pretty well-versed in some aspects of it, but I still need to learn how to cook better. And
you're definitely an influencer.
Oh, okay. Thank you. But I will add one hat for the purpose of this conversation. I'm an adjunct professor at New York University, the School of Global Public Health, so we talk a lot about non-communicable diseases. And so I think what's missing is more guidance. You know, we don't have enough info on aquatic foods. We don't have enough info on what actually is good. There's conflicting evidence out there, and I think FAO is very reputable and establishes research that is data-backed. You know, we need more Nature-published articles to actually help academia move in the right direction and to educate the average person, because that feeds into policy. And, you know, I'm not that much older than a lot of my students, but the point is that they are already going into roles that are very influential in government and local government, helping the average person understand what to eat. And so this data feeds directly through that pipeline. I'll just end by saying that the cookbook that we developed, in addition to key chapters on biodiversity and food waste and climate change, has a lot of data that's taken directly from UN entities, including FAO, the World Health Organization. It has definitions on macro and micronutrients. It has carbon calculations and nutrition calculations on all of the recipes. And so, again, this is based on scientific data that is out there. I am actually here replacing one of our dear colleagues in the space because he couldn't actually make it. And so thank you so much for the honor of being here again. But he and his team wrote an amazing book, which I actually brought to the COP and it disappeared. I promised to take a picture in front of the UN logo and then I lost it. So he wrote this amazing book. I was planning on bringing Food Without Hot Air. And it really talks about the impacts of food and climate change, and it's very data-backed. So, you know, there's a lot out there. And long story short, I wish we would have had this data coming out before this book because it would have made it even better. And I'm grateful that it's existing so that we, on the ground in the public-facing sphere, can actually utilize it and translate it into action. So thank you so much.
Thank you. It's really encouraging and nice to hear that the guidance that's coming out from the UN is helpful to you. And so we'll be sure to disseminate when that new updated food-based dietary guidelines come out as well, and hope that that can help inform your work moving forward. So if you could pass the microphone to our last panelist, but definitely not least of our panelists. Elizabeth has joined us from Ghana. She is a Ghanaian farmer, as I mentioned previously. And so she's looking at interaction with the food system from the supply side, and really bringing an important perspective also as a leader in the community and in women's groups. I understand that part of what you produce are things like okra and tomatoes and other vegetables that are very important for healthy diets. So I'd really love, Elizabeth, if you could share with us a little bit more about what you do and how you work in farming in a climate-smart way.
Thank you, and thank you for this opportunity. My name is Elizabeth Akaba from Ghana, a woman farmer. I lead women's group, and what we produce, we do it for both the local markets and for exports. We do okra, tomato, pepper, garden eggs, ravaya, turia, gua, etc. And then with the women farmers, we normally have about 3 acres of land each. Formerly, women were not allowed to farm. But gradually, as we lost our husbands' lands were given to us to farm on. So, and then there is a discrimination also between the male and female counterparts. But we are trying to get over it. At the moment, with the climate change issue, it's really affecting us. In 2019, we lost 280 hectares of crops due to fall armyworms on our maize. Most of the crops, the lands were rendered useless, and thereby affecting our finances. So now, with this climate change issue, what we are doing with the help of ICRA came to build our capacity, educating the women to use quality seeds. Formerly, because of financial issues, we used to extract our own seeds, which did not help. We normally get low yields due to the extraction of the seeds. But with the help of ICRA, we now buy quality seeds that are from foreign countries. And this very season, I can say we did very well. We got so much yield. And then when it comes to pesticides, spraying weedicide, insecticide, fungicide, and what have you, it was also another issue, all due to financial problems. But also with the help of ICRA, we are using, at least we are able to use quality biopesticides that is helping our crops. And then land degradation is also a problem over there, and it's reducing micronutrients. And we are also trying to get over it by mulching our crops, using green cover crops, and all that. And then education is key. Almost every month, ICRA comes in to educate female farmers on what to do, using black soldier fly, applying organic nutrients and all that. So that is briefly how we are coping with the climate change issues. Thank you.
Thank you, Elizabeth. And in addition to being a farmer, you're also the chairperson of the Tuba Women Farmers Association. Can you dive a little deeper and share with us what that association does for those women farmers in your community?
Thank you. As a leader for the Tuba Women's Farmers Association, what the association does is to help farmers with some inputs and resources. We have some inputs available, not for sale. You didn't pay for it. You come for it after use, you clean it nicely and give back to the association. And then also we help them financially to access credit or loans. And then we educate them, we build their capacity. Gone were the days when farmers were believed to be illiterate. Now you have to be educated to at least read around the label on your weedicide or insecticide, pesticide in general. So we are educating farmers. When you get maybe your 1 liter of weedicide, glyphosate or something, you should be able to read and know the quantity to use at a particular time. Gone were the days whereby farmers just poured any quantity into a knapsack and spray, causing damage to the crops and the land as well. Now with education, a woman or a female farmer is able to read around the label before using the right quantity for the right crops and the right dosage to spray her land. And also we are helping them in marketing their produce. Sometimes people come in, the buyers come in to cheat them. Formerly in Ghana, we don't normally use scale. We just use a basket, or you bargain. Just fetch a handful, that is it. And especially when the fruits are getting rotten, like tomato. After 5 days or a week, it gets rotten. So the farmer is eager to sell it out at any price, and it's really affecting the farmers. So we've come in here to educate them on how to sell, how to scale it before selling. That's another aspect. And then with our education, when the season is on, farmers prefer to use all the land to farm one crop. Now we are saying no. With education, you can do tomato here, do onions, do cabbage, and then you be financially free. That is one aspect. Then aside from that, we teach them on livelihood, like soap making. We help them to make their own soaps. After the farm work, you can use it to bath, to wash your hands, and then to use at home as well. And then I'm also teaching them on how to produce rabbits, grass cutter, and all that. That will help them in the near future. So that is the help we are giving to female farmers in the cooperative. Thank you.
Thank you, Elizabeth. That's extremely impressive. And it shows, we've talked here about a diversity of issues across the agri-food system, but you've really highlighted the diversity of issues within one part of the agri-food system, really showing some complexity there. And I appreciate so much you bringing that texture to what we're talking about when we're thinking through what it means to be nutrition sensitive and climate smart. on the ground. So we have a few minutes. So Elizabeth, I want you to hold that microphone because I want to ask just a real quick question. I'm going to give you 30 seconds to answer the question. What do you want to see coming out of COP27 to advance nutrition-sensitive, climate-smart agri-food systems?
All right. Thanks so much for your question. I've been so passionate about this. Thank you again for asking me. You know, one issue is women have not been loud enough. We want to be loud. We want to be heard. We want our nutritional problems to be to be heard. So if we are loud enough, other people will come to our aid. So that is what I want.
I will join you in being loud, Elizabeth.
All right.
Fantastic. Okay, same question to you, Arlene. What would you like to see coming out of COP27 to advance nutrition-sensitive, climate-smart agri-food systems?
I'd love to see more action in the lead up to the next COP. Like we're starting now for the next one. I want to see more sustainable options. I think yesterday we had Laura Lopez from the UNFCCC, and her job is to make the difficult negotiations between the participants, the government, the organizers, and the local cultural context as it relates to food acquisition and all of that. But I think when we come together here, what we eat, how we dispose of things, it sets a precedent. I mean, I've been reading, before I came, I was reading articles about the situation, and you know, it almost brought me to tears because it's like if we're here and we're not doing it, how are we trying to spread hope for everyone else? I don't feel comfortable being part of something that is hypocritical, and I'm here. So my job is also to be a part of that. You know, I'm not criticizing it. I'm asking myself, how can I make it better? And that's the goal.
Thank you. And I appreciate that you're here with a sore throat because of all of what you're doing in COP27, and you're already looking forward to COP28, looking forward to the future. Thank you. Okay, same question to you, Tom.
Yeah, thanks, Nancy. Well, I'm gonna go with Elizabeth's suggestion because I think if you think about the role of women in food systems, it's incredibly important and vastly under-recognized. And so I think what would be really great to see would be the same amount of women in leadership roles that represent the percentage of women that are involved in food systems. And so half of the workers, people in food systems, are women. In aquaculture and fisheries, the number is even higher. So let's have a system that allows women to be represented in a way that actually represents their real interest in food systems, and I think that will help climate change as well. I'm pretty sure of that. Thank you.
Thanks, Tom. I'm pretty sure that would help climate change as well. So you, Brent, last one. You were our first speaker on the panel, and you're the last word on the panel. Please, same question to you.
I think we should celebrate the victories we've had. And I think the work that we've done on food from Glasgow to this year has been tremendous. We've made huge progress. And I think that we should rest this weekend. We should pat ourselves on the back. And Monday, we need to get back to work to make sure that healthy and sustainable diets is integrated at all levels and is in the final cover decision of COP28. And if we can do that, we'll have had huge progress. So let's recommit on Monday.
Thank you, Brent. Fantastic. And yes, we should be celebrating our accomplishments, but looking to the future and maybe taking a slight rest before we get back to action. So please, everyone, join with me to congratulate our panel. If you'd like to come back, we've got two more speakers that are going to join us virtually. They've been listening in this whole time. And so I'm going to have the panelists come back here so you can see our speakers that'll be on the screen. I hope they're both there. Fantastic. Hi, Gerda. Hi, Robin.
Hey, good morning,
Good
everyone.
morning. Good morning.
Good morning.
Thank you for listening in to this event. We've got Robin Wu. He is a youth constituency member and a nutrition and food systems consultant at the FAO. You might think by his image on the screen, he's probably at the beginning of his career, and indeed he is. We've got Gerda Verberg, who you may all know because she's had a long and distinguished career. She's an Assistant Secretary General for the United Nations and the coordinator of the Scaling Up Nutrition Movement. So she's got a perspective from a different era, a different moment in her career. And so I'd like to turn it over to the two of you. If you could please just give us your reflections and your thoughts for moving forward. I think I'm turning to Robin first and then over to you two to take it from here. Robin.
Thank you very much, Nancy. I take over because Ruben and I have agreed that I would ask him a question.
Okay, very good.
Ruben, what has struck you most in this event?
The most, sorry again, Gerda.
What has impacted you most? What was what has inspired you most?
Thank you, Gerda, for this question. Okay, great. You know, today is the solution day, no? The thematic day, today's solution day. And I'm so happy, so excited after 1.5 weeks listening about these conversations on climate change and nutrition. Today, we hear about how to do it, a win-win solution, climate change and nutrition from our panelists, actually across the food system. Today, even though we don't have any slides, but food system framework already here in my mind. We hear from Carol the biodiversity, the market and diversity of food. From Brent is the national policy, the NDCs. From Tom, the data, aquatic foods. From Irene, the consumer side, and also from Elizabeth, from a production, from a farmer perspective. So it's really this beautiful linkages. I think we're trying to framing agri-food systems thinking, agri-food system approach, but there's still parts of agri-food system not highlighted today, like, for example, the food environment. I think the discussion should continue and there's more actions.
Wait. Maybe we have only experts, but what is the food environment?
The market, I think Elizabeth.
And what needs to happen there?
Okay, great. For the territory, I think what I heard from Elizabeth is very great. She's actually talking about the territory market, and how the farmers link to the local consumers, directly link to the local consumers. I think the first point is to empower the territory market, and second is to make our consumers more accessible to the nutritious food. And I think maybe third, there's need a policy support, empower the SMEs to create an enabling environment for diversity of food. Thank you.
All right. Do you have a question for me?
Yes. I mean, I actually have two questions. So the same. Okay. So first, I participate at many events during this COP because I care. I'm a nutrition practitioner. And I saw there are many familiar faces in the room today. This is good. But I'm thinking maybe those nice ideas and solutions we cannot keep only between us, no? As Irene bring here today is really we need to bring the different audience, let them know to care about climate change and nutrition together. What is your suggestions? How we can better impact to the general public who maybe not that aware of these challenges about this win-win actions?
Well, I'm a little bit more critical than you are, Ruben, because I'm also enthusiastic about people speaking from the heart, etc., being focused on very concrete things. But I would suggest to next time start with the farmers and listen to people like Elizabeth, but also when it comes to Irene, they are talking about the real problems that they are facing on the ground and where they see their challenges. by first making sure that farmers can do their thing and that female farmers, because I was struck by the fact that Elizabeth was talking that about inequalities, gender inequalities, that women are not supposed to have access to land and to produce them, but only if when their husband dies, that they can take their opportunities. Listen to farmers first, and then I think the focus need to be much more on the how. And what I very much liked there was the way Brent was talking about how to make sure that the nationally determined contributions and the food systems pathways at the countries and for nutrition, also the nutrition for growth commitments are put together and are concentrating on the overlap, because all of them need to are focusing on our food production and on our food systems. And once this will be done, not only by research institutions, because research institutions and researchers are important, but bring them to the political economy and make sure that the Minister of Agriculture, the Minister of Food Systems, the Minister of Health and the Minister of Environment are sitting also around the table and are developing a plan, also an investment plan. And for that reason, I would have liked to hear from Tom Grasso to focus more on the how to do this. And what does it cost and what does it take? And will farmers who are doing this, producing more biodiverse and indigenous, will they be able to feed the 800 million people? Because if they are not able to respond to this question, it will go nowhere, because governments want to fill people's bellies and they don't think about nutrition if they have to prevent people to go out to the street. Back to you.
Thank you. Maybe
Robin, you said you had one more question, but you've only got 1 more minute. So please, quickly.
No, Nancy, I think we want to hear from Tom. As the question goes to Tom,
No, we don't need to hear from Tom. We don't need to hear from Tom. I would like to have your reflections.
My reflections on the policy side?
No. Oh. Okay, do you have a next question? Otherwise, I have a question for you.
I think the last question is, what do you want to see from this COP, Gerda, as you highly engage in the many events?
1 minute, Gerda.
Yeah, I would like to see food systems indeed and nutrition reflected in the outcomes, but also in the new mandate of the Coronivia working group. I would like to see the initiative on climate action for nutrition reflected in the outcome documents. And I think all of us have homework to see how we can understand the institutional backbone and the institutional arrangements of UNFCCC in order to make it also possible to have joint inclusive funding and fundraising in the Green Environment Facility, or the Global Environment Facility, but also the Green Climate Fund. Let us do our homework, let us much more discuss on the how, and let's understand the political economy, because only if governments are involved, the systemic change that is needed to create a future for all will be reached.
Thank you, Gerda, and thank you so much, Robin. We appreciate very much that you were online and clearly listening, and gave us some concrete suggestions and recommendations for moving forward. Don't go away. We want to take a picture with you in the background, so please stay right there. We have come to the end of our time together. It's been a fantastic session. We know that the need for climate action is only getting more urgent by the day. And we also know that malnutrition is still one of the greatest threats to humanity. We still have hunger really impacting not only individuals, but economies and nations as a whole. And it's not only hunger, it's malnutrition. Even in high income, high resource settings, we have obesity increasing. That is causing a decrease in our ability to reach our full potential as humanity. So these two issues could not be more urgent, and we need to tackle them together. We can tackle them together. We are tackling them together, as we heard today. So thank you, everyone, for joining, and please join me in a round of applause for our two speakers and the panelists today. And real quickly, before you walk away, I do want to thank EFAD and the Alliance of Biodiversity and CGIAR and the Scaling Up Nutrition movement that helped FAO organize our event today. And I invite all of you to have some coffee and maybe ask our panelists some questions out here in the coffee area. But you two don't go away. We're taking a picture.